Um, as most of you actually know, he's adjunct professor of psychology and a member of course-based research faculty group here at LTU. But aside from being an educator, Professor Harris is a licensed professional counselor. He's been helping individuals, families, and organizations improving their quality of life for over 4 years, right? Today, Professor Harris will tell us more how he uses social media as a teaching tool in his classroom, as well as a tool in his private counseling practice. So without further ado, Professor Harris.
Thank you very much. Again, really glad to be here. A experienced speaker, but again, that does not stop the anxiety. And it kind of sets the tone for why we're here. Because again, it talks about how I cope with it and still produce my outcomes as I tell clients and students. Because again, you know, things happen, but outcomes still have to be reached in our social class. So that's a good start. So one of the ways I was thinking to begin is to give just kind of a brief, but like I say, breathy introduction of my lifespan development. Is something that I talk about, you know, again, during presentations, during counseling sessions, because as we know, counseling is what we call a relationship-based practice. And it is the relationship that we use as the vehicle to teach, to support people's growth and development. So needless to say, it's very important for people to see me as a person. Strengths, challenges, all of the above. And that is the idea behind using the social media to do what we call modeling. You know, modeling what expectations are, growth and development, how you overcome adversity, how you cope with suffering, all of the above. So that's what I decided to do. It was born out of the reality that, again, I like to communicate, but I come from a culture and a community that is notorious for not communicating, for having very significant barriers to our expression. And seeing that growing up, it made it very, very hard for me as I evolved. I'll tell you why in a second. But I knew that I wanted to contribute. I knew that civic engagement has grown to be something of a responsibility for me. So I talk about what's the best way for me to do that. And it's through modeling and teaching my own story of how I, you know, got through very real life-threatening mental and emotional illness. So the story always begins, I tell two very specific stories about my growth and development. The first story that I tell is that I was a gifted child. I was one of those gifted kids that seem like it's a whole lot more of them these days, but that's what I was. The reality, though, is that I'm from deep, deep, deep in the inner city of Detroit. And the reality, what we accept is that literally, social and emotionally, socioeconomically, the living conditions all around, they're like third world countries inside of the nation. And that's where I grew up. And education wasn't very high on our radar. So the fact that I was gifted went unknown until one day I was in the second grade. And they took me out of class and they put me in the third grade. And I didn't know why, I was just a baby. And an interesting, impactful tidbit to that story is that the school that I went to was right across the street from my home. So every day up until that day, I would walk into school and there was these stairs that went up and around. And a child's imagination, I'm like, wow, the big kids go up there and they just disappear. So I'm wondering what's up those stairs. And this is for at least 2 or 3 years. I'm wondering until they took me out of class and marched me up the stairs. So I'm already terrified. I don't know what's going on. And that lets you know, again, it was a state of DPS because to this day, my mom says she has no clue that happened. How can you do that and not alert the parents? You understand what I'm saying? So ultimately, what happened was that reality turned out to be a significant incident of trauma. because the teacher, as I say, she was this old Southern granny, and she was proud of me. It was a unique situation. But the way she went about it is that she teased and belittled the other kids. So every time I got something right, she'd be like, second grader, second grader. So I could feel the kids increasingly hating me because of that. And I was already a shy person. It wasn't until I was about 14 or 15 years old that I started to look up. You know, I was that cripplingly shy, but I could just feel the kids not liking me. So needless to say, it was a moment that I remember like it was yesterday, and that's one of the things we talk about with post-traumatic stress, is that the brain can't really tell the difference if something was 25 minutes ago or 25 years ago. That's why when people's post-traumatic stress is triggered, they can respond as if they're still in that incident of trauma. So that's what happened for me, is I remember it. Again, the question was, who is the governor of Michigan? And I'm dating myself. I'm a lot older than I look. Trust me, I'm not a student anymore, although I want to be. But the reality is, I knew it right away, but I didn't want to answer it because I knew how she would respond. And I knew the kids already hated me. But she didn't want to let it go. I don't know. She liked politics. But the answer was, it was Blanchard at the time. And of course I knew it. But she wouldn't let it go, and the silence was unbearable. So I just mumbled his name. And she was like, Governor Blanchard. Blanchard. You know what I'm saying? She was excited. And then she said, second grader. And in that moment, I sunk in my chair. I put my head down, and I remember accepting it's not cool to be smart. And I started hiding the fact that I was smart. And it took me 25 years to get over it. The trauma responses that happened is I just stopped doing my work. I would start assignments and I would stop doing them. I would fail tests on purpose, because you have to understand, I also come from a culture and a community that even if you pronunciate your words, they're saying you're trying to be white. You're trying to be something that you're not. It's like, well, we are supposed to be ignorant? It's another thing that was difficult for me growing up. So again, it's very hard, and that's one of the pictures that's on the Instagram. I don't know if anybody's seen it, but I started to think when I was processing this, did that really happen? Were those trauma responses that significant that I would stop doing my work? And there it is, Scripps Elementary School, 5th grade, 1991. Perfect cursive. I can't even write in cursive today. And I just stopped, and that's what the teacher wrote. Why did you just stop? It was because of that. So the lesson that I tell people about that is I started to hide something that I really was. The second story that I tell is that, again, as people know about me to this day, I'm this big, fluffy, cuddly, baby and puppy-loving person. It's just who I am. You know what I'm saying? I've always been that way. I love animals. I like to smile. But there's a saying that we say, you can't be a fawn living in a jungle. So I had to develop a very aggressive, a very violent exterior. And I was going through a lot of teasing because I was severely obese growing up as well. And you add that to the sensitive nature, again, I had to try to ward off those threats. But it was never who I was to my core. So I also talk about how social situations contributed to me being exposed to the criminal underworld as well. And I spent a significant amount of time in that environment from my mid to late teens to my adult years. It was my narrative. It was my identity. It was how I lived. So being that aggressive, being that violent, presenting that way, you fit right in. But it was never who I was. So I was trying to be something that I really wasn't. So the combination of hiding what I was and trying to be what I wasn't, along with several addictions that I picked up along the way. I mean, I was probably a full-blown alcoholic by the time I was 16 years old, because that's the culture and the family and the community that I came from. That's what sunk my quality of life, needless to say. And living in the environment that I was in, again, as I would say, I didn't slip through the cracks, I fell through the gaps. And that's just what happened. So my quality of life was pretty much down in the dumps. And till one day in early 2000, My mom, she's never been assertive with me. She's always wanted me to just be safe, especially when I got thugged out, because my mom retired 25 years as a sergeant in Detroit Police Department. And she just wanted me to be safe. But one day out of the blue, she busted in my room, threw something on my dresser and said, "You're going to that." And then she just walked out. I said, "Oh my goodness, I guess I'm really going to that." So what happened was, it was a semi-pro football tryout. And that's what ultimately saved my life, because I was down and out. I really didn't have any desire to live. I was homicidal. I was suicidal. I didn't have anything going for myself. But it was that mother's intuition that she knew she had to do something. And ultimately, I drove to this football tryout. And again, basically what it was just us playing full contact football. Grown men in the rain and in the mud, crashing into each other. No pads, no helmets. And it was like the most fun I had had in a very long time. So from 2000 to 2004, that's the only thing that kept me alive, was that. So in 2011, getting past the story a bit, because again, we're pressed for time, but I was at Oakland University, again, sorting my life out, and I saw this flyer, like, Oakland's getting a football team. And I was like, of course I want to be a part of it. And I started. I was a part of it from the beginning. I was part of the, leadership, recruitment, and all of that. So one day after practice, I'm in my apartment, and I see a commercial on NFL Network. "Tell us why you love football." It's like, okay. I've been a writer since, I don't know when. So I wrote a story. I sent it in to them, and 2 months later, they called me from New York. Like, "Wow, we love your story. We've picked you as a national finalist. We want to send a film crew and all of that. Congratulations." Yay. I said, "No. You asked me why I love football, and I told you. I didn't say anything about being on TV." Because, again, I'm still very shy. I don't like attention. It's part of it. So I told them no, and they came down like, "Oh, wow, how dare you say no to the NFL," kind of deal. And then I explained to them, like, you have to understand that I'm studying to be a mental health clinician, and there's still very much stigma attached to this reality. And I came to Oakland University to escape that. I don't want anybody to know that. They understood, but they said, "Hey, bro, we really love your story. And you got to understand, there were tens of thousands of people who applied, and you're one of 10. So, let us know what you want to do, but we can't wait too long because we have a deadline." So I thought about it, and again, I was going to say, yeah, I'm good. I don't want to do it. But the first thing I thought about was our team, honestly, because, again, if you know anything about Oakland University, there's this long-standing myth that you can't have a football team at Oakland University because the founder said it can't happen. So every time we were recruiting, every time we were fundraising, that's all we heard. They can't have a team. I was like, if they see us on TV, they'll know we have a team. But the second thing, which brings us to why we're here now, is because my story is one of trauma to triumph. Real true healing, real true growth. And I've had several professionals who've been doing it for a long time that literally looked me in my eyes and told me the only hope for you is to take meds, sit in a corner, and hope you don't kill yourself or you don't kill anybody else. That was my prognosis. And I turned that around through my efforts. So ultimately, this story that we're going to start with before we get into the interactive part is the 3-minute video that NFL Films shot about me. And as they know about me, I said, "Bro, let's cut a deal. How about y'all just give me the video and not put me on TV?" Because I grew up watching NFL Films, and this video still moves me. So hope you enjoy it, and then we'll get interactive after that. Thank you. Part of something special. Life is all about meaning for me, doing something meaningful.
He was one of the first guys that contacted us about playing. I just remember his email. It just said, "Hey, I'm 30-something years old." He has experienced a lot of things in his life that kind of made him who he is today.
You're blessed to play this game.
You're blessed to have your activity in your limbs and to be in your right mind, to earn the right to play this game.
I knew early on that I had a gift for football. My dad, my uncles, my brothers, my cousins, we would go outside and play. I grew up on the east side of Detroit. I didn't know it at the time, but we stayed in a very dangerous neighborhood. In high school, I was about 500 pounds. I always got teased because I was overweight, I was fat. I wanted to fit in, so started drinking, quickly got addicted to it. I couldn't see myself living to even be 20. 2004, my mom, she just happened to see something in the newspaper. I was looking for football players. She just called them, told them that I'm coming. We was playing full contact football, just hitting each other, just like when I was a kid. And it was just so fun. I had the biggest smile on my face. It gave me something to live for. One day, I saw a little flyer, Oakland University, getting a football club. There's never been football here.
He wanted to become an officer. He wanted to do like everything he could to help get the club started.
I'm a fun-loving guy. On the other hand, I have to straighten my backbone up and speak like the 32-year-old man that I am, you know, to these young guys.
Don't be selfish. Don't be selfish. Be man enough to walk away.
I embrace that role as counselor as well as a teammate.
He's a guy that lifts you up. It's always the next snap. It's always the next game. It's always the next chance to get better.
My name is Christopher Harris. I am a graduate student at Oakland University in the counseling program.
They say, who got a football team?
Anytime I got really down, football would come knocking. That's why I love football.
Alrighty, that is my video. Thank you. Oh, wow. It's clapping. Thank you. So, yeah, we're going to get interactive now. Yeah, this is going to be very interesting. I had a trial run with my students at LTU in the cultural site class, as well as my students in our dual enrollment class at New Haven. And it kind of went better than I expected. So I'm very interested to see how this one goes. So again, we're going to open it up. Hopefully everybody in here took a look and fire off what interested you the most or what stood out, because trust me, I can't believe I posted this much stuff. It was a commitment. It was a commitment. Like I said, this was born out of something that I thought to do 2 years ago. So this is like 2 years worth of posts, and it's literally my journal. So some of the stuff gets very hard-hitting. But again, the number one goal is to facilitate conversations about this real hard-hitting stuff. But again, the focus of all of my work, whether I'm doing presentations, whether I'm doing individual sessions, the focus is to hold a mirror 2 inches from your face. How does this content apply to you? How does it apply to your life? How can it improve your quality of life? I'm just the messenger. All righty. Yes, sir.
Chris, those were just powerful stories.
Thank
you so much for sharing it.
Thank you so much.
You've done a great job sharing everything, just the honesty and the insight. That's what social media is about.
Yeah.
What was the most difficult part for you to kind of pull this together?
Oh, man, that's a great question. What's your name, sir? Glenn. Okay, thank you. I think the hardest part for me is, again, the fact that I am a notoriously isolative person. That's what we call it in our industry, health and human services and psychiatric care In residential, when we're assessing people's personality types, we say this person is isolative, meaning they prefer their own space. They don't interact much. And that's how I've been for a very long time. Like I said, I was cripplingly shy as a child, you know, and it took me, and I tell the story about a good friend of mine when I was working my first job at Kroger down in the village, Grosse Pointe. I would bag my groceries like this, you know, but I had a friend who would always come up to me and would always be talking to me. So after a while, my head would finally go up. So that's probably still the hardest part. You know what I'm saying? I'm very uncomfortable with attention. And needless to say, this is putting eyes on me. You know, so that's probably the most difficult part, but thankfully, again, with my career in higher education, as well as my professional life, you know, I'm much more comfortable in social settings than, you know, I was before. Anybody else? Content? Yes? No? Yes?
Well, I just never thought of football as meaningful.
Interesting. Interesting.
Can you expand on that a little bit more, like how that became so meaningful?
Yeah. Okay. Wow, that's a great question there, Weinstein. But yeah, because it was always a part of our life. You know, I come from a family of athletes. That's why one of my businesses is called Save Our Athletes, because I come from a long line of just standout athletes. A lot of us were supposed to be professionals. We were born with the ability and the fire and the passion, but we did not gain the discipline. That's why I talk about athletes across the board. You have to have a self-discipline to even make it on a team, let alone maintaining it. So for us, it's just something we always grew up doing, you know, football and basketball, football and basketball, football and basketball. A little baseball here and there, but football and basketball is what we did all day, every day. And because we were in such a dangerous environment, it's what kept us safe. You know, thankfully we had adults who provided enough supervision to keep us safe and create rules and expectations that, okay, at this point, you better be in this house. Oh, no, you can't go down the street. You can't even go around the corner. You understand what I'm saying? So what we had to do was play football. So, again, playing, watching the Lions. We were Michigan fans as well. Go blue, you know. It was just a big part of who we were, you know, and that's what I talk about when we assess people, period. Everybody has a narrative. The story that you tell yourself about yourself is called a narrative. And we were athletes. We were football players. So, and again, my mom is notoriously not athletic. And as much as she likes to celebrate football when we're all watching it, she says, I just don't understand it. They get all broke up and then take their butts right back out there, you know. But she knew that about me. She knew I needed something to save my life, and that's exactly what it was. You know what I'm saying? So the ability to play football at that time, it was literally the only thing that I was living for. You know, I got so low, I was literally like a mental health shut-in. You know, activities of daily living is another part of the assessments that we do. Hygiene, cleaning up. Mine was at about a 0. It was that bad for me. The only thing that got me up and going was going to practice and going to games. So the love of the sport, again, I can't explain, it's just fun. You know, we're kind of brutish like that, you know. So it was just the fun nature of it, and also something to look forward to. That's how I started losing weight, because again, we were notoriously only 15 or 17 guys for the first 2 or 3 seasons. But what we did was we ran and we hit, and we ran and we hit, and we ran and we hit. Every practice and every game. And again, it was just so fun. It was fun to me. I can go on and on about football, though. Yes?
So you're saying you're an isolative person.
Yes, ma'am.
but you like to communicate.
Yes.
You're very verbal.
Yes.
So it looks like from the film that you were also coaching and like very like in a leadership position.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as an isolative person, did you learn leadership skills, or did you find that they went hand in hand with communicative skills, or did you train yourself in the leadership part?
It's a great question. That's why I love higher education. That's just a great, great question. I think it was something that the foundation is that I've always been kind of a character, if you can put it like that. That's why one of my titles of my story is Odyssey of an Oddity. You know what I'm saying? I've always been kind of an interesting person. And that's come along with, because again, along with athletes, a lot of us are performers, you know, singers, dancers, you know, musicians, all of that. So that kind of what gave me the foundation for leadership. But again, socially, I was put in a position to where, again, I was pushed down and pushed down. So what I say is me being isolative is not so much a personality trait of mine. It's a trauma response, you know? So when I am effectively coping with my traumas, of course, I'm comfortable. You know what I'm saying? I'm comfortable. But because of those trauma responses, it can make it very difficult. Like I said, some days my only motivation to get up and get going and be around peopling, as we like to say, is when I get to come home and be by myself again. You understand what I'm saying? So this is just another layer of trying to support this, what I know about myself. And that's what I tell clients consistently. You have to know these things about yourself to be able to put yourself in the best position and to be able to cope when you know trauma responses, triggering events take place. So to get back to the question of leadership, it was kind of something that I evolved into. Because again, I pack a presence at every step of the way. People would just kind of grow to revere me for some of the stuff that I do. You know what I'm saying, athletically, with my arts and things like that. And once I seen that kind of responsibility in what we commonly call the power of persuasion, I think that's what kind of informed my leadership more than anything, is that, you know, if people really look at me and look up to me, especially like my younger cousins, when I saw them grow from children to adults, that probably was supported my leadership more than anything. When it comes to the team, is because, like I said, I was 32 years old. And the majority of our team was 18-year-olds. So I kind of had to be, you know, that leadership position right there. So again, the best way I can describe it is kind of like sports. Because like I said, I'm good at football, but basketball is probably my best sport. Because I can impact the game more than I can in football field. So it's kind of like if we're playing pickup. If I got some small guards that can shoot and can dribble, then I'll just go ahead and play center. But if I am the best dribbler on the team, then I'll play the point guard. So it's kind of like whatever position, whatever role I'm in, I can lead as well as follow, pretty much. So, yeah. Thank you. Great question. Any other questions? Anybody identify something? Yes, sir. And then we come to Vivian.
I sympathize with your, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
sympathize with your description of your relationship with your teacher.
Yes.
From my own classroom experience, where
Yes.
I have students that I suspect are coming from urban or disadvantaged channel. They have a sense of fish out of water about them.
Absolutely.
And I sympathize with your description of that tension between kind of calling them out and bringing recognition to them.
Yes, yes.
Either because they're particularly behind or they're
Right.
remarkably ahead.
Right.
Versus just wanting to leave them alone, like the fact that they're in the room with the rest of us is plenty for them.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And
Trust
so
me,
I
I hear what you're
sympathize.
saying.
So I would be interested, you've been around us for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
What are your impressions of Lawrence Tech and how we facilitate those kinds of, do you think we are welcoming to students who are from backgrounds like yours?
That's a great.
Things that you see on campus that you think, oh, you guys are idiots. How can you alienate these people this way?
Right.
You know, and
Yeah.
I would be really interested in your perspective about
Right.
what you think we're doing and
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. And that's one of the things I said. Since the day I stepped on campus, I've been assessing it because that's what I do for a living. You know what I'm saying? I contract with schools and districts to assess them at a 20,000-foot view all the way down to the ground. So, again, I'm a strengths-based person, so I always start with the strengths and the positives, you know. And the number one positive of all growth and development is the intention. And that's what I noticed here at LTU, and honestly, that's what's keeping me here at LTU, is the intention to be welcoming, to improve, to ask questions. Okay, where are we struggling? Where do we need to get better? You understand what I'm saying? Not turning away from the reality that we have one of the most difficult living environments just south of us. How can we reach out and be helpful? You understand what I'm saying? That is pervasive here on campus. And it's encouraging, you know, because it's hard for me sometimes. Again, when I say I come from like a third world nation inside of a nation, that means every time I cross 8 Mile, I feel like I'm a refugee. I feel like I don't belong. You understand what I'm saying? I had several situations sitting in the adjunct faculty where people pause like, bro, you're not supposed to be in here. You understand what I'm saying? Just like when I'm working in North Oakland County, I feel like I always got to have on my badge that says, okay, I can be here, you know? But where we struggle is really some gaps. You know what I'm saying? There's some gaps in relationships, department to department, peer to peer. And when you have those gaps in relationships, you can easily feel like you're on an island. And you can easily feel like I don't matter. So if the professionals can feel like that, how will the students feel if they're isolated, if they're on an island? So that's one of the things that I've noticed that we struggle here. You know, there's gaps. There's gaps. The other thing that's difficult, and this is something we just talked about this morning, because I'm working with the women's lacrosse team, doing some, you know, sports psychology, but again, in this population, it's all about optimum wellness. It's all about focusing on their overall development. And that's one of the things we talk about because there is some very, very brilliant people here on campus. They're very, very smart. You understand what I'm saying? But a lot of the research, both quantitative and qualitative, will say that the higher that level of intelligence, sometimes the relational health of reaching people is a significant barrier. You understand what I'm saying? So the ability to really, truly reach people, now more than ever, because millennials are relationship-oriented people. You understand what I'm saying? If you sit on an island and say, hey, you have to come up to me. You have to gain my level of knowledge. I'm not dropping down to you. You can lose people. You understand what I'm saying? And again, got one of my students in here, and she knows that. She's taken 2 classes with me. It's all about the relationship. It's a relationship-based practice, you know? And I focus on their overall quality of life. And that's what we say, especially in primary school. Kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I've heard it consistently, again, from my very first semester once they grew to trust me. I'm having some challenges in this class. I'm having some challenges with this professor. And it's all interpersonal stuff. It's all interpersonal stuff. So really, truly supporting people's ability to connect on a relationship-based level, I think that's where we struggle here on campus more than anything. Because again, when people check out, that's why one of my trainings is called Avoiding Adversarial Relationships with Millennial Youth and Emerging Adults. When they check out and they view you as an adversary, whatever you're trying to teach them could go in and out. You understand what I'm saying? So those are the 2 areas I feel like we can improve, but that's kind of deep. You understand what I'm saying? As I say, a zebra, you can't say, hey, zebra, take off those stripes. You're a horsey now. That doesn't happen. You understand what I'm saying? So what I challenge people to do is work within your strengths. to improve on some of these relationship-based practices. Social and emotional learning skills is what we call them. The ability to maintain and grow effective relationships in any environment. Thank you. Vivian?
So my question is more about the IG,
Yes.
about the Instagram account. I'm just interested to know how you use this in the classroom.
Okay.
Do you have the students read it?
Mm-hmm.
Do
Yeah.
they their own?
Mm-hmm. So one organizational tool that I use, I call it 1, 2, 3. So the example was for them to identify 1 to 3 posts that they felt something about, that informed them of some challenges they may be having, some questions they may be having. So they would pick them out, and that will facilitate the interaction. So whether it's advancing understanding, which is the first level of everything that I do, advancing understanding is teaching. We have to learn about these realities in mental and emotional health. We have to learn about these realities in education. We have to learn about these realities in your individual life. That's advancing understanding. That's part of it. The second part is healing. It's always healing. You know, that's something the old school used to say to us. Oh, you ain't never been through nothing in your life? Well, keep on living. You're going to go through something. That's a part of the human condition. So healing from that, growing from that, that's the other level of what we do. That's why, again, one of my high school students, she was triggered. She started crying. And we had to work through that. You understand what I'm saying? The last part is the most important part, which is growth and development. Life skills, acquisition, and development. That's what teaching is all about, is trying to improve your knowledge, your quality of life. So each one of the students, I asked them, okay, we went around the room. As you go through this content, which post stands out to you, you know? So one of my favorite ones, one of my littles brought up, that's what I call them, my littles. Oh, where is it? Okay, what happened? Anyway. So anyway, it is a post from a 1980s iconic cult classic called The Revenge of the Nerds. It's icon status. So she picked this post where he talks about, I'll find it in here soon. Bro, somebody help me out here. Oh, it's trying to make me log in. I don't even know my password, honestly, so I can't log in. Like I said, I'm not too tech savvy. That's another thing my students know about me. So again, I want to bring it up so everybody can see it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Here it is. So again, this is a scene where he says, wait a minute. Would you like to live in the ascendancy of a civilization or during its decline? Because they are all getting stoned, and you know, you get stoned, you turn into a philosopher. That's what I used to say growing up, especially in my outlaw days. It's like, I would love to be around a bunch of NASA scientists drunk and high, because I know it will be some riveting conversations. So the funny part about it, the reason why I put that quote is because that's literally what's going on now. It makes people uncomfortable when I start talking about this, but we're literally in the middle of a global paradigm shift. That's the reason why in even the most brutal states there's uprisings, because we are transitioning from a more individualistic species to a collectivist species. And the millennial transition is what's leading that. So when you talk about the ascendancy or the decline of a civilization, it's kind of like we're right in the middle of the ascendancy of a new civilization and the decline of another. And it's fascinating. So that's why I posted that. So she brought that up because A, her parents are obviously 80s icons, if you love the Revenge of the Nerds. And she wondered, why did you post that? What does that mean? The ascendancy of one civilization and the decline of another. And that's what I told her. That's what I'm seeing with this millennial transition. As millennial generation rises to global leadership, this is what's happening. You know what I'm saying? It's changing the face of the world. Anybody else? Questions? Posts? Yes, sir.
So also about all of this, you say a little bit about what it is about Instagram that you find so effective, like why use Instagram rather than like some other platform?
I liked Instagram for the visuals. It's mostly pictures. You know what I'm saying? So the pictures for me is what stood out the most, you know, because the pictures can jump off the page. It's just like a painting. You know what I'm saying? There's so many hidden things in pictures. That's the first thing that attracted me to it. The other thing that attracted me to it, again, is I love the hashtags. I'll just be honest. Because it's like once you click something with a hashtag on it, it'll give you a whole other list of posts related to that. So when I'm posting things like complex post-traumatic stress and somebody hashtags it, there's going to be a whole lot of posts on post-traumatic stress. And there's going to be people talking about their experiences. There's going to be researchers talking about their research. You understand what I'm saying? So when I realized that that was a good vehicle to model this work after, because again, not only will you see it from me, when you hashtag stuff, you can see a whole lot of other things from a lot of other people. I think that's probably the main reason why I chose this. Yes, ma'am.
So, I know this, but I want to know more.
Yes.
When you use this as a vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
and you go through your 1, 2, 3,
Yes.
and you have them identify 1 to 3 posts they feel something about, that challenges them, about you ask about the questions to advance their understanding.
Yes.
And it's very personal, right?
Yes.
And then when you get into the healing, and then when you talk about the life skills that go through this, how do you do that? Do you do that in conversations? You give them prompts and have them go away and think about it and turn in essays, and then you have them discuss it in groups? I wonder how it manifests itself. Or is it all between you and them, or is it between the classmates?
Well, it really all depends on the focus of it. So like when I'm in class, like here, we only did it once. It was only just to support their growth and their development, to have those conversations, to facilitate them. Because one of the things that we talk about is clinical significance. And we will not and cannot ever be doing anything that resembles individual counseling in a session or a setting that is not clinically significant. So that's what I tell them at the beginning. It's like, okay, if you're triggered or if something comes up, then we would have to say, okay, you want to focus that, or we'll talk about that in private. And then if it gets too deep in private, I'll say, okay, I'm going to refer you to somebody. You understand what I'm saying? So all of this is kind of like a group level counseling session. So in group level counseling, those are the things we talk about. Is when a person says, okay, I'm having issues with postpartum depression. We would talk about, in general, what postpartum depression is. Again, it's to facilitate that conversation, to get people talking about it. Then in general, we would talk about some of the common signs and symptoms of postpartum depression. And then in general, we would talk about some coping skills and how they can apply to that person. And then the person would respond, okay, I understand, I'm receptive. But the generalized way that we talk about it is probably the ceiling that we'll go to using this in an educational setting. So with my clients, and I have a few of them who do the same thing, I am more open. You know what I'm saying? We can do more clinical-oriented interventions and have more specific, what we call person-centered interventions as opposed to being in an educational setting. Does that make sense?
So it sounds like you use it to kickstart conversations about
Yes.
these topics.
Yes.
And it
Yes.
doesn't get too personal enough that it's comfortable.
Yes.
But it's mostly to kickstart the content.
Correct.
And you found that it's just something they can relate to, and it's very easy.
Very easy.
Grab onto things.
Yeah, the youngsters are kind of advancing past it because it's kind of like every time the old people attach to something, the young people are like, we got to get out of here. So first it was Facebook, and everybody was on Facebook. But then your grandparents were on Facebook. It's like, we got to get out of Facebook. You know what I'm saying? Then it was Instagram. Now, again, like I said, I'm almost 40 years old. It's like, if we got this 40-year-old doing higher education and clinical interventions with Instagram, it's time to get off Instagram. So now, bro, what y'all got? What is it? What are some of the apps y'all use these days? Timlin? Snapchat. There's Snapchat. Again, I've never used a Snapchat before. I don't know how it is. What are some other ones? TikTok. Yeah, I don't use TikTok either. So, yeah, it really is to start that conversation because, again, especially in the community where I come from, and I talk about this a lot. I know I made a post about this as well because, again, I wear a lot of hats in society, but the number one hat that I wear is child welfare. I'm a child welfare advocate. So it's very, very personal to me, you know what I'm saying, when people are victims of abuse of any kind, of neglect of any kind. And we talked about what's going on at Michigan State and in other powerhouse institutions like the church, where literally generations of abuse and predation has been allowed to fester. It's because nobody is talking about it. And the people that do talk about it, everybody else is looking at them like, oh boy, you can't talk about that. So that's my number one motivation, and that's like my clarion call, is we can't not talk about these things anymore, especially with what's going on. And that's what was most comfortable for me, just using something like social media. Because literally all I got to do is post, express, and then we can facilitate conversations about it, you know? And that's something that I've heard consistently, again, from clients and a few of the students. Like, yeah, I never looked at it like that. That's one of the things that gives me the chills in counseling sessions. When people say, like, yeah, I never really looked at it like that before. Because that means you're opening up their mind to a new way of seeing things, which will support a new way of doing things.
It's funny, it makes me think
Yeah.
of the olden days when there was art therapy.
Right.
You know, it's really just like a new kind of art therapy.
That's exactly what it is.
They're just different images, and it's where they live, where
Yeah.
they get their images.
That's exactly what it is, you know? And that's what this is called. Again, social work 101 is you meet people where they are, you know? So if social media is what students are using, then that's a vehicle. It's a tool that we can leverage to reach them. You understand what I'm saying? Because, again, now more than ever across the board, you have to be able to reach before you can effectively teach. That's just it. That's how I view it. So, again, teaching has always been a relationship-based practice. Good. Good. Anybody else? Questions? Anything? I'm going to start scrolling and picking stuff if y'all don't. All right. One of the ones I know that, might as well. Why not? I love this one. Shocking paper predicting the end of democracy. The quote is, the human brains aren't built for self-rule. Send a chill down your spine. It's like, okay, so what are you saying? What this came out of was like the biggest international conference of psychologists. And this Sean Rosenberg person is kind of at the top of that pyramid. And what he's saying is something that I've been saying for a very long time. Because, again, I've been studying the human condition for a very long time. And I wonder, what are best practices? I wonder, what are the most effective ways for humans to live in a community? you know? And when I read this, it kind of really sent a chill down my spine because it's like, okay, if you're saying that fundamentally and at a foundational level, we aren't capable of doing it, then what is this we've been living in? You know what I'm saying? What is this we've been living under? And that facilitates a conversation that, again, we are not talking about. And that's the reason why I post a lot of this stuff, is to try to get people talking about it. You know what I'm saying? So again, this article is just very, very hard hitting. And I heard in the article that, you know, he ruffled a lot of feathers. He ruffled a lot of feathers. But these are the kind of things for me that, you know, we have to be talking about this before we start talking about anything else. That's the kind of things that I talk about. Again, feel free to jump out with any questions, any posts that you've seen. What's another one? Come on, bro, help me out. Is anybody on the page right now? Yes, no? Okay. Yeah, that's kind of was the interactive part. I was hoping people see some stuff and ask some stuff, whatever jumps out at you.
I have another question.
Yes.
So, in kickstarting this,
Yes.
do you also have an end goal
Mm-hmm.
where they think about things and post? Do you access social media throughout the process, or just to kickstart?
Just to kickstart the conversations, to kickstart the advanced understanding, to kickstart the healing, to kickstart the growth. So again, what I mean when I say modeling is because, again, you know, that's the reason why I start with my story, because, you know, I could have been just another statistic. Some would say I should have been just another statistic. But that's what I tell my clients, is that when I counsel and when I teach, I literally am saying and using the therapy that saved my life, that continues to allow me to thrive in my life, these coping skills. You know what I'm saying? So when I'm talking about advancing understanding, and I'm talking about healing, and I'm talking about growth through life skills acquisition and development, the expectation is to support individuals' ability to do that for themselves. You understand what I'm saying? So when we say kickstart, that's overall the process that we're trying to kickstart, is their ability to advance their own understanding, to heal from the traumas that they may have experienced, and to grow and improve their quality of life through life skills acquisition and development. Yeah. CC Harris PC. So like if you do like Instagram.com/CC Harris PC, you'll be able to bring up my page.
You know, is Instagram, is there censorship?
Mhm.
Is there anything that's off limits? Like,
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah.
is there a point where you don't use things like inappropriate? You know, you're sharing
Yeah.
a relationship,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
there
they.
has to be a professional.
Correct. They have rules, they have guidelines, and obviously some of the stuff, you know, if it's too graphic, if it's too explicit, they'll send people messages like, yeah, bro, we took that down. You know what I'm saying? Because it's way too graphic, it's way too explicit. But it's also, again, a growing concern, just like with, you know, YouTube and others. Because, again, this is the age of information, and the flow of information is power, literally, which means the restriction of information is key, you know? So that's what a lot of people are talking about, is that, yeah, some of the conversations that are being had on there, people feel like they're biased and they'll take them down. It's not explicit. It's not graphic. It just doesn't promote the status quo kind of a deal. So you kind of got that going back and forth with it. And I read that a lot. This one is another one, kind of came from very interesting origins. And it says, the relationship with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship that you have. And that's why one of my messages to people, period, regardless of where they are in their lifespan development, is how are you responding? It's not what's happening. It's not where you are. It's how are you responding to it? Because that's your responsibility. That's why I say when I'm doing my presentations, I'm doing my trainings, or I'm doing counseling, is don't look at me. Hold a mirror 2 inches from your face. How are you responding? How does this affect you? How can you improve your quality of life? Where are areas where you have to grow, where you have to heal? That's what this is used to do, is to support people in their individual efforts. So, yeah, nice. Yes, sir.
Has anything interesting come up over these experiences in terms of learning about how your students use Instagram or other social media?
Yeah, it has. That's a great question. One of the things that I notice is that, again, this is just an assessment. It's not a judgment, but it really all is just peer engagement. A lot of it is just peer-to-peer engagement, you know, when there is so much learning opportunities, you know what I'm saying? There's so much networking opportunities, you know? Pretty much everybody got Instagram just like Twitter, you know what I'm saying? Government bodies, the Department of Defense has Instagram and Twitter, you know what I'm saying? So that's one of the things that I'm very, very careful when I address it. But I do say that, yeah, this is a tool that it seems like you're not using as much as you can. Because if you're just trying to, you know, connect with people, I'll just put it like that, on an interpersonal level, of course that's a good thing. But there's so much learning that can be done. So that's one of the things that I've noticed about social media, you know, with this, you know, these age groups, you know, teens and, you know, emerging adults. You know, a lot of them just use it for the peer-to-peer engagement and not too much exploration or learning, which is a powerful tool to be used. Yes, sir.
I scrolled down to it, Lee is Heath Ledger's Joker.
Yes.
Which I've always been blown away by the character.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if students would get, just with this, the same message from him as far as being a radical as being challenging the system,
yes,
as I get from it.
Yes.
Because for me, this is like basically telling the students, think for yourself, do what you want to, do what you want to do.
Right.
Look at the hypocrisy of a lot of this.
Right.
His character portrayal, that's what that said to me.
Right.
Have there been responses from students regarding this particular post?
Well, I didn't hear many responses about the post. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear really responses about that particular post, but I have had some conversations about it. And to that point, again, it's a great point. That's one of the reasons why we talk about people as individuals, because everybody has different sets of eyes and different experiences. So we can all be looking at the same thing, but everybody's seeing something different. So again, to that point, because again, as you know, when it came out, it was kind of an uproar. Before it even hit the theaters, they're taking all these precautions because of that fact alone. You know, when you're talking about, because one of the things I've studied since a child is war. Yeah, I've studied war and violence. So currently I call it the theories of war and interpersonal violence. And you can't talk about anything that's happening in any country without talking about the reality of war. So when you're talking about buck the establishment and you're talking about do what thou willst, you understand what I'm saying? It goes against the control that's needed to maintain. You know what I'm saying? And now when it seems that every step of the way, the existing power structures that have governed human life for, let's just be generous and say, a couple centuries, they're losing. You understand what I'm saying? The textbook, well, the handbook that we use in cultural psychology openly says the ivory tower. I kind of cringed when I read it because in the separatist circles that I used to run in, these kind of phrases are stuff we said in hushed tones. Nobody talked openly about them. But when this handbook published in 2019 is saying the world outside of the ivory tower needs the interventions of cultural psychologists more than ever, that's what I think of when I think of the Joker movie, because it was such an accurate depiction of the impact of the socioeconomic conditions, the impact of complex post-traumatic stress on a person's development. And what if that one match lights all of these other people who have similar stories, who have similar concerns? That's what I feel the biggest fear was, to tell people like, yeah, we gotta put a little bit of warning on this movie. More than we want people not to be triggered, we don't want people to be inspired to take to the streets. Because again, it's happening all over the world right now. And it's very, very disconcerting that it's not being as talked about as it needs to be, you know? And that's another reason why I'm standing here talking about these things. So yeah, I really got to see that movie again. It was great. Thank you. Okay, yeah, I see it. Thank you. Anybody else see something interesting? Interesting comment?
So, Chris, in the picture with your face right here on the right.
This one?
What did you want them? What do you want to convey by that?
Interesting. Why not? I'll just play it.
What were they?
Heaven and hell are states of being, a state of consciousness. And when people who are in a state of heaven behave, heaven is created. And when people in a state of hell create, hell is created. The places we commonly refer to as heaven or hell is where masses of beings with either the collective state of heaven or the collective state of hell create. The love and the horror, the beauty and the dismay of this reality that I believe is that both exist here in this species of human. And this is all about the fight to either create heaven on earth or hell on earth.
So that is kind of my current conclusion on humans, on the earth. Because again, me being the kind of mind that I've been since I was aware of my metacognition, all the way up until now, I am increasingly frustrated by the reality that, again, with all due respect to people's belief systems and what they think the origins are, there is no conclusive truth to who we are, what we are, and where we are. And I'm frustrated by it. And that's what I mean when I say, okay, what are we really talking about if we're not talking about that? So I've always been on a hunt to answer these questions. You know what I'm saying? My first passion is cosmology and astronomy. And I call it the first science because, again, if that's what we're accepting, then before there were before there were humans, there was the stars and there were planets. So naturally, that's the first science. So I've always been trying to answer that question. Who are we? Where are we? And why do we exist? And that's probably my current conclusion. Because based on what I've seen, based on what I've studied, there's literally people walking around that are just angels. I like to watch those puppy rescue videos when people take these street dogs and they heal them up, and you can just see all the sadness and the sorrow in the dog's eyes, and then when they get cleaned up, they're all happy and stuff. That's heaven to me. That's literally heaven that's being created, whereas where the puppy dog was living before was a version of hell. Matted feces, no food. So it's literally states of being is what I'm saying. So as opposed to it being a place where people go, that's what I believe, is that when you have a whole bunch of people who have a state of service, a state of help, who want to heal, they can literally create heaven. But when you have people that are vicious and violent and destroy, they can literally create a state of hell. So again, with the acceptance of millions upon millions upon millions of galaxies, with millions upon millions upon millions of planets, can it be so hard to believe that planets actually exist where everybody has that state of heaven, of helping, of service? What kind of world would it be? That's one of the things that I would ask growing up. What if the news showed us all of the lives that were saved, all of the miracles that happened? Because I guarantee you they happened in that day. What would our view of the world be then? What if all of our politicians were not so much business people, but they were humanitarians? What would the policies of this planet be then? So again, that's what that video is for. This is my current conclusion. That's what we teach about research. That's why I love research. You don't ever really answer anything. This is what it appears to be. This is what it looks like. And this is the need for further research. So this is kind of like the end of my research, and I'm looking for more information to support this hypothesis. Oh, thank you. She's clapping, everybody. You didn't catch that. She clapped for me. Yeah. Nice. Nice. Anybody else? What do y'all see? I want to officially mention this woman. Because, again, I would not be here if it wasn't for her. I've been telling her story without saying her name for about at least 8 or 9 years. So this lovely woman's name is Rianne Benson. Very, very magical story. I can't even tell the whole story. But again, I used to work in the life, as we say. You know, security and protections. You know, I was kind of comfortable being in environments where there were a lot of celebrities and such. And long story short, again, this was 2004. So remember I said from 2000 to 2004, all I had going for me was semi-pro football, you know, until I met her. And this woman was so physically attractive, she looked like a walking oil portrait. I'd never seen anything like it. And again, I'm cripplingly shy. But it was almost like the spirit was pulling me toward her because they knew what was about to happen. Now, before I met her, again, I come from the community, and my narrative was that of a black consciousness separatist. I was a black national. Again, there's a large and growing population of black people who want war. They view it as war. It's no different from any other subjugated population throughout the history. It's just our story, you know? And that's how I lived, you know? Do you really think I would get a job and pay taxes to a system that has destroyed us and murdered us for centuries? No, I won't. So we called this school and all schools like it obedience schools. They're not trying to teach you. They don't want you to improve your quality of life. They want you to be indoctrinated into this system and to be good workers. You understand what I'm saying? That was our narrative. So I swore them off. I would never go to an obedience school until I met her. And again, the caliber of females and women I had been around before her, I would always tell this kind of a joke. Okay, hey, the only reason I graduated from high school is because I was cool with the teachers. I was a notorious F-up. Ha, 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 ha. And again, celebrating ignorance is one of the things I learned as a barrier to our community. The typical woman would laugh. And we'd share a hearty laugh. Yeah, F education. It's not important. So again, I was pulling out all the stops, as you can imagine, to try to catch this woman's eye. So when I pulled that out, she kind of looked at me with a scrunched up look like, but you did graduate, right? And I put my head down and said I graduated. Come to find out, Rianne was graduated from the London School of Economics, and she went to Harvard. And she was like a corporate investment banker or something. And again, she's from West Africa and split her time in London and New Delhi. So, of course, I never saw her again. But that didn't stop me from being obsessively smitten with winning her. And the fall of 2004, after I met her, is when I started at Macomb Community College in Warren, Michigan. And the turbulent first 2 to 3 years at Macomb and at Wayne State was only because I wanted to win her. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be standing here. I wouldn't have a degree. I would still be saying these are obedience schools and I want nothing to do with them. More than likely, I would be dead. So she is a miracle. And again, it's the first time in 16 years I ever told her story. I told the story at our, you weren't there that day. What was that, when we went in New York, RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology? We had something called Diversity Theater, and I told the story of her, and they kind of played it out with improvisation. It was magic. But even then, I didn't tell her name. The reason I told her name now is because, again, some kind of transition happening on this planet, and I feel like I just want to do my part to support what I believe in. That's why I do this. All right. 1:48. We can do some closing comments or anything like that. I'm very glad I had a chance to mention her. But yes.
How often, you say you just tried this, or have you been doing this for a while in your classes?
Oh no, this is my very first open event, and in anticipation of this event, I only did it 2 other times. So this was, like I said, the beginning of me trying this. You understand what I'm saying? So yeah.
From what you've seen, do you think you're going to use it as anchor points during your class, or
Yes.
just to get your class rolling? How do you see it?
Yeah. What I envision this to be is more of a community-oriented approach, because this is a part of something I created called Quiet Talks in the Community. Because again, you know, I come from a community and a gender that we don't express as much as we need to. You understand what I'm saying? So I knew that I needed to find a way to be more comfortable expressing who I am and what's going on. So that's what started me using this. So I see myself using this more as a tool in the community, especially in urban communities, to get them understanding and accepting therapy and counseling, because so many of us need it. In the classroom, I could definitely see myself using it as that relationship building tool. Because again, relationship-based practices, it's very important for people to see me and to know me as a person, as a professional, my strengths as well as my challenges. And that's a part of every class that I teach, is that relationship building stage. So I can see myself using this more in the relationship building stage to, again, build that, what we call therapeutic alliance, to set that foundation of being able to teach. And of course, supporting them with their quality of life, because again, a lot of these conversations, again, it's very discouraging every time I hear, especially young people talk about their mental health issues, and they come to me and say, I never told anybody that. I was like, okay, well, that's an issue. We need to identify some supportive people in your life.